Hillary Clinton recently, it was reported, and I want to get your take on this, Bob, in Beijing, China, where she was over there to broker a deal on any future borrowing that we might do from China by way of bonds, treasuries. And, well, there's a little caveat that was thrown in this. If the United States defaults on this, and we're talking trillions of dollars, that there's a little thing that the United States government will institute called Eminent Domain to pay the Chinese back with real estate. Have you heard anything on this, Bob?
Oh, yes. And it's possible and it's probable.
We're here in Southern California at the Long Beach Naval Weapons Shipyard, one of the only deep-water ports in America that our military controls. Actually, only one of three. And it's the only one on the western side of the United States controlling the Pacific. The Clinton administration decided to shut it down in 1993, and now he's letting his good buddies, the military industrial complex of China, under COSCO, the military industrial shipping firm that is responsible for bringing slave goods and, some evidence shows, mafia influences into our country. This is a major national security breach. We must do something, and do something now. Only the local people and a judge here in town in Long Beach, California, have the will to stand up against this tyranny. And what is the tyranny? There are over 30 million political dissidents in Chinese slave labor camps in the mainland of China. This has been widely reported. Why then would we allow COSCO, which is controlled by the bloodthirsty, fascistic leadership of China, to have our only deep water port right in the heart of our western coastline? And something that we really see no reason for is the fact that we have been denied access to this facility, even though it is in the process of being dismantled and closed down. We're not allowed to show you the extensive shipping facilities, cranes, docks, and indoor facilities for working on large ships that China military shipping concern COSCO is going to get. We talked to Ernie McBride, Naval Intelligence here, and he told us that we'd have to call the Navy and get permission to get in. Well, I did that 3 weeks ago and never heard back from them, even though I called the Navy about 15 times. So remember that. Your government, which pretty much at the top level is selling out, thinks there's no problem with the communist Chinese that treat their people like slaves, are gaining our strategic military bases and ports all over this country. But the people on the ground that are actually in the military and are guarding and protecting this place, they think it's terrible because they've got some common sense, because they haven't been paid off like your president has.
More breaking news now, this time on a stunning revelation that some of America's most sensitive military secrets are now in the hands of Chinese hackers. Well, they deny it. The hackers. The White House taking notice. A new report reveals that cyber spies gained access, we believe it was cyber spies, to plans for dozens of America's most advanced weapons, including the F-35 stealth fighter jet, the advanced fighter jet, one of the most expensive in U.S. history, another Black Hawk, a utility helicopter widely used by the U.S. military, the Aegis ballistic missile defense system, which is the backbone of America's missile defense system, as well as the Navy Standard Missile, which is a primary surface-to-air defense weapon, and our top-of-the-line Global Hawk drone, a high-altitude, long-endurance unmanned aircraft system. That's a capability no one else in the world had until it was stolen.
That cybersecurity is one of the administration's top priorities, and you have both the U.S. and China as two of the world's largest cyber actors, and it's important that we continue to sustain meaningful dialogue and work together. And as Secretary Kerry announced back in April, we've agreed to establish a cybersecurity working group with China in order to raise our concerns and have a constructive dialogue.
It tracks really nicely with Chinese military priorities. How do you beat U.S. air defenses? How do you let China attack our carriers? How do you preserve China's ICBMs from U.S. missile defense? How do you get advantage in the air and in the sea? It really narrows the gap and it shades the odds in China's direction. We still are militarily superior, no doubt about that, but we're not as superior as we were before all this happened. So some serious risk as a result of these Chinese successes.
Chinese national engineers at key NASA facilities have allegedly been allowed access to top-secret defense technology, who then took this information back to their handlers in communist China. According to a NASA whistleblower, this includes, quote, missile defense technology, high-performance rocket engines, fuel and oxidizer tanks from an anti-satellite weapon, guidance and terrain mapping systems from the Tomahawk cruise missile, and a radar altimeter from the F-35. Representative Wolf, through information gathered from whistleblowers at two NASA facilities, Ames Research Center near San Francisco, California, and Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, not only found top-secret defense technology was stolen, but that the Obama administration, including White House officials and Department of Justice, may have shut down the investigation. Upon allegations that defense secrets at the Ames facility were breached, an FBI investigation was launched and completed, the information then being turned over to Assistant U.S. Attorney Gary Fry. Fry began to prepare indictments and convened a secret grand jury. However, literally minutes before Fry was to begin the proceedings, and without explanation, he was replaced by Assistant U.S. Attorney Elise Becker, and the investigation suddenly stalled. According to Representative Wolf, Department of Justice and White House officials more than likely intervened in the investigation to shut it down. This is all eerily similar to Nixon's attempt to quash the Watergate break-in investigation. Nixon shut down the investigation to ensure his re-election. The Obama administration is alleged to have shut down the NASA investigation to ensure that the funneling of top-secret defense technology to communist China continue.
The U.S. Justice Department has announced its indictment of 5 members of the Chinese military for cybersecurity breaches against 6 American companies. In a press conference today, Attorney General Eric Holder announced that Westinghouse Electric, Alcoa, Allegheny Technologies, U.S. Steel, United Steelworkers Union, and SolarWorld had their systems hacked in a case of economic espionage. Here's what the Attorney General had to say.
The alleged hacking appears to have been conducted for no other reason than to advantage state-owned companies and other interests in China at the expense of businesses here in the United States.
These are the first ever charges against foreign state officials for infiltrating U.S. commercial targets by cyber means.
Manhattan's tallest building is drawing criticism from New Yorkers. It's over a decision to honor the 60th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's takeover of China by shining red and yellow lights.
Totalitarian dictatorship should not be honored by the Empire State Building tonight.
Protesters are red with anger over the Empire State Building's decision to honor China's Red Revolution.
Former President George W. Bush actually started a national security language initiative and invested $114 million into expanding these programs all the way from the elementary school level up to the university level. So before, Alona, you could really only take Chinese language classes in certain select elite colleges and universities, but now, you're seeing these 7- and 8-year-olds who are pretty fluent, and, the educators that I spoke with in my story are saying that they're really hoping that these people can be the next Hillary Clintons and Barack Obamas and hopefully bridge the gap between the United States and China.
Bukachi. What is Bukachi? Mandarin Chinese really isn't that hard to learn and speak.
你好，你好吗?
Bring American jobs back to America. So this week it was shocking to learn so many great infrastructure projects are underway in America, rebuilding bridges and roads in American cities, but they've hired Chinese firms and Chinese workers.
Let's see. This is made in China. Made in China. China.
Fed clears China's first U.S. bank takeover. So remember, we just covered an article recently about in Michigan, China City, basically being instituted. This is after a couple places out west. Basically, little China cities are coming to fruition. So the United States opened its banking market to China. China's biggest bank, ICBC, for the first time, clearing a takeover of a U.S. bank by a Chinese state-controlled company just days after high-level U.S.-China economic talks in Beijing. The Federal Reserve, which is a private cartel of banks, approved an application from Industrial and Commercial Bank of China to buy a majority stake in the U.S. subsidiary of Bank of East Asia. So these are the biggest trader sellouts. They don't really represent you. They never really did, but they're just kind of calling themselves federal, immersing themselves in government talks and discussions. But it says here the transaction will make ICBC the first China state-controlled bank to acquire retail bank branches in the United States.
Chinese television and newspapers bragged this week that the Chinese PLA has awesome power to strike American cities with nuclear missiles launched by Chinese submarines. Military videos and photographs have appeared on TV news programs and in newspapers this week in China, touting the communist nation's growing military might and a future war with the United States. The images have appeared on China Central TV, the People's Daily newspaper, the PLA Daily, the China Youth Daily, and the Global Times. The Global Times published a lengthy article titled, "China, for the first time, possesses effective underwater nuclear deterrence against the United States." The article includes 30 photographs and graphics showing the damage that Seattle, Washington, and Los Angeles, California would suffer after being hit by Chinese nuclear warheads launched by stealth submarines. The article boasted that the West Coast radiation would be carried by the wind to Chicago. The Chinese news report said the PLA missiles will not target the U.S. Midwest, but strike the densely populated West Coast. In addition to Seattle and Los Angeles, the Chinese news media said San Francisco and San Diego will be targeted for destruction, killing or injuring up to 12 million Americans. The Chinese newspaper said that Chinese ICBMs launched over the North Pole will easily obliterate New England and much of the East Coast, including Annapolis, Maryland, home of the U.S. Naval Academy, Baltimore, Maryland, home of the NSA, Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, Portland, Maine, and Norfolk, Virginia, the biggest naval port in America. An estimated 34,000 Japanese troops, naval destroyers, and fighter jets are scheduled to take part in a large-scale military exercise scheduled to end on November 18.
The Obama administration on Friday accused a Chinese fighter jet of conducting a dangerous intercept of a U.S. Navy surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft off the coast of China in international airspace, the fourth such incident since March. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the previous incidents publicly. Kirby said the August 19th maneuvering by the Chinese jet posed a risk to the safety of the U.S. aircrew, was inconsistent with customary international law, and complicates efforts to improve military-to-military relations, which are often strained. Kirby said the Chinese jet made several close passes by the Navy P-8 Poseidon plane, coming within 30 feet of it at one point. He said the Chinese jet did a barrel roll maneuver over the top of the Poseidon at one point and also passed across the nose of the Navy plane, exposing the belly of the fighter in a way apparently designed to show that it was armed. Kirby said it happened about 135 miles east of China's Hainan Island. In 2001, a Chinese jet collided with a U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft off Hainan Island, killing the Chinese pilot and forcing the Navy plane to make an emergency landing on the island. Washington severed military relations with China after that episode.
I have a truck full of Mexicans, a truck full of Chinese, and a truck full of Islamic terrorists. What truck do you not want entering the United States?
Chinese.
Do you think President Obama believes that there are Chinese coming over the border through Mexico?
I don't know. I'm not certain, and that is where we may disagree. I'm not certain how much we have to fear Chinese coming across the border.
In this part of the world, we don't have a lot of tourist attractions, but this is one of them. This is an emergency distress beacon. And most people find it curious that it's in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese. And since the last time we were out here, they've even been so nice as to add a 5-gallon bucket of water, courtesy of the United States government. This has been here at least a couple of years. They put it here for a specific reason because this is the point that they travel quite a bit. There are 8 of them along the Texas border.
I have a question for you. Why do you think that sign should be down along the border in Texas? Written in English, written in Spanish, and in Chinese. The government made that, Congressman.
Our government?
Yes. I mean, you've been in Congress for 22 years, right?
Right.
Okay. Has anybody ever showed you that picture before?
No.
Nobody's ever.
No.
Nobody's ever gone to one of your hearings and said, "Look at this picture."
No.
No. Marketing 101. Make your advertisements to the people who are going to read them.
We know they're coming in here. We caught a hodgepodge group back out here, 16. Had 2 Asian girls, Chinese. They both spoke English. And both of them paid $50,000 each to come in here.
No kidding.
Oh yeah. Then we had, and in that same group, we had at least 3 or 4 Indians and a couple of Pakistanis. Okay. I think there was 1 Mexican in the group. That was it.
Am I wrong in saying that the president's #1 job is to keep Americans safe?
Yeah, everything else is secondary to that. Clearly, it's not even that it's the main, it's almost, to me, it's the #1, 2, and 3. Everything else, no matter how important anything else is, health, education, none of that matters if we're dead.
How would you describe President Obama's attitude toward the war on terror?
I would say it's very schizophrenic, damaging, and it's been very frustrating.
So, Congressman, what you're saying is that the #1 job of the President of the United States is being handled in a schizophrenic manner.
Yeah.
So in the months ahead, I will continue to engage Congress to ensure not only that our targeting, detention, and prosecution of terrorists remains consistent with our laws and system of checks and balances, but that our efforts are even more transparent to the American people and to the world. We cannot look back years from now and wonder why we did nothing in the face of real threats to our security and our economy.
Shortly after President Obama's State of the Union address, his administration allowed 2,000 of the most dangerous illegal aliens detained in U.S. prisons to be released into the general public. The White House blamed this on looming budget cuts that would not take effect for another 30 days. Janet Napolitano denies any involvement. I sent an email to the Department of Homeland Security in which I asked, if the funding to detain 2,000 criminals was no longer available, why not release Americans whose sentences were coming to a close in the near future? I did not receive a reply. As of April 2013, the whereabouts and names of the released criminals remain classified.
为什么强大的国家都会走向灭亡呢？古希腊、罗马帝国、不列颠帝国、美国，因为他们都犯同样的错误，与原来使得他们成功的原则背道而驰。美国政府企图以庞大的开支和税收来摆脱严重的经济衰退，巨额的所谓刺激开支。 庞大的医疗改革，政府接管私有企业，债务累累。当然，我们是他们的大债主。现在他们都得给我们干活。